Mo kí gbogbo ilé ní orúkọ Olódùmarè. Mo kí gbogbo àwọn àgbààgbà tó wà lórí ìjókòó. Mo kí gbogbo àwọn akẹgbẹ́ mi tó wà lórí ìkànnì. Mo kí gbogbo ọmọ Yorùbá pátápátá níbikíbi tẹ́ ti ń gbọ́ mi. I greet you all, my fellow Nigerians, my fellow West Africans, my fellow Africans, and the citizens of the whole world. Today again, we are back into another Yoruba Ronu special, and today's program is going to be fantastic. Unfortunately, we are like 1 hour, 30 minutes behind schedule. We used to start like 6 p.m. Nigerian time, Yoruba land time, and we used to finish around 10 p.m. So that's just 4 hours, and we used to keep to time. So because of the time restrictions, we just be able to use 2 hours, 30 minutes today. That means this particular lecture we might finish it next week. Next week, we are going to finish this lecture. But today is going to be the prelude proper. It's going to be the juxtaposition proper. Mo kí gbogbo yín, Fẹ́mi obìnrin, Ìbídùn Àlàbí, Listener Montero, Lalekan, Dr. Rotimi, No Nonsense, Dr. Adeolu. Dr. Adeolu, you can come on stage and also speaking in Russia, ẹ darapọ̀ mọ́ wa lókè. I'm sorry that we are starting late. Ẹ má bínú sí mi, ẹ̀yin èèyàn mi. There's some things that happened today. Today's topic is, can we start? Yeah, I think we can start. Ẹ má bínú. Today is Efunroye Osuntinubu. In fact, the full name of Madam Tinubu is Efunroye Osuntinubu. And the question is, was she an heroine or a villain? If you observe, the Yoruba Nollywood actors and actresses, they are doing something that the rest of Africa should be jealous about. For the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we've been watching films like Spartacus, The Gladiators, movies like Lawrence of Arabia, for the Ottoman Empire, but you hardly see many of the history of the Yoruba people who built empires, greatness, that could rival any people from different parts of the world. And because of this reality and this reason, a lot of young Yorubas do not actually understand their reality. They think they are just another tribe, quote and unquote. They think they are just another group of people. They do not actually understand the greatness of their ancestors. To the extent that young Yoruba youths, especially the women, do not even know that they do not need to use Margaret Thatcher as role model of feminism, that they do not need to use the Queen of England as their role model of feminism. There are powerful historical figures in Yoruba land, in this part of the world, that should be their role model of feminism. And when I mean feminism, is that the women should have equal status economically and politically in governance anywhere in the world. So what did this new concept that the old world, the Western world are trying to fund and push, nobody needs to come and teach the Yoruba people what feminism should be all about. Alaafin Oronpoto expanded and built the Oyo Empire. She was a female Alaafin. Oluwo, Oni Luwo Bagida was another female Oni of Ife. So when it comes to, and it was our children that gave birth to the Oluwo, and the Oluwo dynasty in current day Osun State, in Iwo Town. So when we talk about the greatness of women, the importance of women in governance, the Yoruba people have been treating and uplifting their women far more better than many of the civilized worlds. Let me give you a good example. Switzerland started allowing their women to vote in the 1970s. Women could have equal power with men in governance in the Western world in the 20th century. Meanwhile, there is no governance, no government in Yoruba land that never had women in the decision making. That is why it is totally wrong for a Yoruba women to be using the reality of Igbos or Fulanis or Arabs or European or Germans to now be using that as your yardstick of what women power or women empowerment should be. So Madam Efunroye and Madam Efunroye Osuntinubu is the role, it should be a role model to all Yoruba women. And somebody said some people are going to feel, oh, he's already taking sides. And a lot of people, both friends and foes, have been writing different treatises. And unfortunately, this movie is now being released when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is currently the president of Nigeria. You know, the what Tinubu needs wants to be, a lot of people want to defame that name for political agenda and in order to gain political leverage. Because they need to talk down on that name. They need to ridicule. They need to, when you hear Tinubu, they want to equate it with evil. You know, they want that name. That is why a lot of activists and cash-activists all of a sudden started forming moralists. Is on which movies should the Yoruba actors and actresses be to produce? And it's also very unfortunate. You know, Madam Efunroye Osuntinubu was a Yoruba leader. Madam Tinubu was a Yoruba nationalist. He was never a Nigerian. He was somebody that fought for the right of indigenous Yoruba people. I'm still going to get there. So what is the business of Awa from Jos, or Uche from Ebonyi, or Effiong from Akwa Ibom, trying to have an opinion about the historical reality of the Yoruba people? And this is one of the problems that Nigeria has not been defined. A lot of people do not even actually understand what Nigeria is all about. And we should always fear fools in large numbers. When you have fools in large numbers, they are capable of destruction. So this is why the first pretense of morality that has permeated the Nigerian political and social media space about this movie is all political. Let me give you an instance. People that thought that General Sani Abacha, that was busy assassinating political opponents, was a good administrator, all of a sudden now feel Efunroye Tinubu that existed more than 200 years ago, close to 200 years ago, should not be celebrated. It is called selective outreach and selective hypocrisy. So Nigeria is not, to the Igbos, to the Ijos, to the Benis, to the Benue, people from the Middle Belt. We don't hate you. But we want you to know something. If the Hausa Fulanis want to celebrate with Madam Fodio, it is not the right of the Yoruba people to start going and start saying all sort of rubbish and saying, oh, he should not be celebrated. I'm going to give you one instance. The biggest plantation slavery in sub-Saharan Africa was built by the Sokoto Caliphate. There are different forms of slavery. We have the chattel slavery. We have plantation slavery. We have indentured servitude. There are different forms of slavery. I'm not here to justify slavery whatsoever, but I'm a realist. And the world is full. It's not a place where you laugh and everything is okay. The world is full of darkness. The history of the world is full of darkness. And we need to have the courage to go back into history and to be able to talk about our past. Why not trying to whitewash anything that has been done in the past? We are also not going to go the route of self-immolation and trying to think the reality of the 1800s is the same as the reality of the 21st century. So let's talk about slavery in Yoruba land. There's a reason why I'm taking it one step at a time. Before going into the life of Efunroye, I keep on saying Efunroye and Heroine because their life is almost the same and they existed almost the same time. And both of them had almost the same power. One was for Egba and Leko and Lagos. The other one was for Ibadan. And the funniest thing is that both of them had Egba roots. And I think Egba women have special genes in them. You know, the Efunroye in Ibadan was had Egba roots. The Madam Efunroye Tinubu had Egba roots. You know, so but that means Egba women, and again, Madam Fumilayo Ransom Kuti also had Egba roots. To all the Egbas in the house, Mojubao, I give you guys maximum respect. And I think if you still want to marry, those of you that are still single, I think you should try Egba women. I think they are very powerful. I'm not trying to, something is there. Because you look at these women that have they shook the history of Yoruba land in the 1800s to the 1900s. They are from Egba. Most of them had Egba, and they contributed to different Yoruba kingdoms and different Yoruba empires. So, let's go there. So, in the olden days, the issue of morality, about what is right and what is wrong, it was not the British that came or the Europeans that came to teach us. The Yoruba people had their own laws. That is why there's a Yoruba proverb that says, "Ìlú tí ò sófin, ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ ni ò sí ńbẹ̀." So the Yoruba people had their own laws, their practices, and their own customs. There was a particular book written around 1900 to 1910. I got that book and I read it. It was written 120 years ago. And it was written by a Yoruba man in the person of Ajisafe Moore. That was the name of the person that wrote this book. It is the only piece of historical fact that described the Yoruba legal jurisprudence. It is the only book where you can actually delve deep 200, 300 years ago. What was the banking system of the Yoruba people? Were? So because some people thought it was the Europeans that brought banking system into Yoruba land. That's not true. There's a reason why Yoruba people excelled in banking compared to other races, other people in the world. So we had our own banking system. Yoruba people had a system where our inheritance. Yoruba had a system on medicine. Yoruba people had a system on when people are caught stealing. What do you do? So we all had a form of morality. Even we have a code called the Omoluabi philosophy, which is to ensure we behaved properly and harmoniously with nature and with our fellow human beings and other animals. So what was the sin? What was the penalty for many of these things? Many of these, there was a lot of capital punishment in the olden days. There was a lot of capital punishment. Even though we had prison, if somebody did something wrong, you put them to tubu. So you put them there. But we did not have an industrial prison system. What do I mean? If people are captured in war, you go to war, you capture 20,000 people. There's a reason why I'm laying this foundation. So you can first understand the socio-cultural, socio-political reality of the past. Because in the minds of these Gen Zs, they think there is Nigerian correctional services, prison services 200 years ago. These Gen Zs think that there is prison system 100 years ago. There's no prison system 100 years ago. There was no prison system 100 years ago. So when you go to war, you capture 2,000 people, 3,000 people, 4,000 people. How do you deal with such prisoners? You have three options. Because if you go and read the book written by Pa Jisafe Moore, you are going to understand, coupled with other historical records, how Yoruba people dealt with prisoners. How we managed our prison service. So we did not have an industrial prison system. So what we had was that there were three options. Selling people into slavery was a punishment. You are caught in the act of rape. You are caught in the act as a prisoner of war. Or you are caught, you are in the act of debt. You default in debt. And even if you default in debt, there's another system they call Olosigba. Olosigba. I cannot explain that in English language. So like you went to go and borrow money. Your parents borrowed money and they can't pay. So what you do is that you now work for that person. It's a form of servitude. For close to 10 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on the agreement, in order to cover up the debt. That's a form of servitude, form of slavery, if you want to go it that way. So, slavery was part of the legal system in Yoruba land. So, if you capture people, you sell them into slavery. If you capture people, you sell them into slavery. The British did not bring slavery into Africa. Slavery already existed in Africa. And slavery is not an African thing. It was a global phenomenon. The word slaves comes from a Slavic word called Slav. Now, who are the Slavs? The Slavs were the majority ethnic nationalities from Eastern Europe. So when you hear slave, 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 slave is a European terminology that came from the word Slav. So the people of Poland, Russia, Serbia, Bulgaria, all those places, Croatia, those are Slavs. So the Eastern Europeans used to be seen as the backward Europeans for a long period of time. So the Roman Empire used to raid the Eastern Europe and take a lot of people, capture a lot of people from that place to access. It was a kind of a slave reservoir. So the term Slav became synonymous with slavery. Shambami. So that you understand that the world has never been fair to anybody. The world has always been the history of the world is very, very dirty. You don't need to be emotional for you to understand the history of the world. So the Ottoman Empire used to also capture a lot of white slaves, the Slavic slaves. It was around the 300 years ago to 400 years ago that the European powers came together and said, we will not accept for the Caucasian race, no matter maybe they are Slavs or Germanic, to be used as slavery anywhere in the world, slaves anywhere in the world. So it was never, in fact, when it comes to global slavery, the black people came late to the party. All over the world, different races were enslaving themselves. It was later on, it's the anyway, there are two types of, there's a reason why we need to explain slavery. Because I've seen a lot of people trying to push agenda. And what is the agenda they're pushing? Oh, she stole slaves. Oh, she stole slaves. And we need to explain this thing so that you can understand. Because in their mindset, in their minds, their European masters never sold slaves. In their minds, the civilized world, quote unquote, that is what an average Yoruba Gen Z wants to be. A Yoruba Gen Z wants to be British than the British. He wants to be American than the American. He wants to be Canadian than the Canadian. Meanwhile, the history of his own people is even far more civilized than the people he wants to become. He views the world through the lens of Nigeria, and that's not true. That's not good. Nigeria is a geopolitical entity made up of different civilizations. There's no Nigerian civilization. If you say, oh, there's a Nigerian civilization, that is a Western colonial civilization. And that is anti-African. That's why the only people that know what they are doing in this country are the Hausa Fulanis. They've held on to their own Afro-Asiatic Fulanized Islamic civilization. While the rest of you are busy becoming Europeanized and Westernized. And they understand geopolitics. So, and that's why when I saw the outrage, I was also angry yesterday. When they said they want Sharia all over Nigeria and that kind of thing. I didn't, because our corner go by you. If we can so identity to you know. Our corner bat you there. If we can you want to be more Roman than the Rome, and you want to be more Catholic than the Pope. Our call. And in the history of the world, the conservatives will always subjugate the liberals. It doesn't matter how long it takes. 10 conservatives will rule 2 million liberals. That's the way of the world. That's the way of the world. So they have always said it. We will be in Nigeria on one condition. The Islamic civilization will reign supreme. The question I'm asking you as a Yoruba man or woman, listening to me, which civilization does your ancestor have? It has to be Oduduwa civilization. It has to be Oduduwa civilization. So let's go back to slavery. So, slavery was a form of a punishment in Yoruba land. It was punishment. They will sell You are caught in the act of rape. If they don't want to kill you, they sell that person into slavery. They sell that person into slavery. Because where are you going to keep, which house are you going to build a system where you are going to keep 10,000 people? You are going to be feeding them. There will be there will be personal hygiene, social hygiene. There will be infrastructure. So it's just like this person is already a criminal. If this person is already a criminal, so why should we keep somebody that is already a criminal? Why should we keep them? Keep feeding them? It makes no sense. Sell them, get money as a form of economic gains to the society. So that was how law and order. There was a lot of capital punishment in the olden days. A lot of capital punishment in the olden days. So that was how they kept law and order in the olden days. It was very brutal. So slavery, I've explained that kind of slavery. Now, what is plantation slavery? We must not mix up the slavery of the transatlantic slave trade with the slavery that existed within Africa. Don't mix it together. Don't mix it together. When you are talking about plantation slavery, you don't have rights. You have no right. No single right. But in Yoruba tradition, they will say, Eru ni baba, ọ̀nà ló jìn. In the Yoruba anthem, which was adopted by the entire southwestern states in Nigeria, he said, Bá ṣe bẹ́rù la bọ́ mọ́, bá ṣe bí ẹrú, òun la bí ọmọ. So that was our view about slavery. If you don't understand Yoruba and you are listening to me, kindly find somebody to interpret to you, because I can't go deeper than that. So when you understand all this reality, so that was, even slaves became landowners, became powerful men and women in Yoruba land. So that was the kind of system we had. But in plantation slavery that we had that was industrialized commodification of human breeding of human beings. So what happened in America was they created plantations, there was no machines, and people were being bred like animals, strong bones, based on genetic traits and phenotypic appearances. And that was how, so it's a different ball game. It's a different ball game. The only places that were able to do such a thing that I know in Africa is Sokoto Caliphate and Zanzibar. The Sultanate of Zanzibar, which split from the former Sultanate of Oman. So I'm laying the foundation of, hey, he was a slave trader. Many of our forefathers were one way or the other, they had slaves in their harems. If you're from a powerful family, if you are from a powerful family, if you are from the powerful aristocratic family in the olden days, there is 9 over 10 chances that your family had slaves. Had slaves that were working for them. They were working for them. So that's why I was telling Christians that were trying to have, Abraham had slaves, Isaac had slaves, Sarah had slaves. So if you remember what King David did when he laid a curse on the Jebusites, what Joshua said against the Jebusites. What did Joshua say against the Jebusites? Joshua said the Jebusites, the indigenous inhabitants of Jerusalem, will continue to be hewers of woods and drawers of water for life. They became slaves in the ancestral homeland to serve the Israelites. Am I lying? It's in the Bible. It's in the Bible. So this issue, and I don't understand what happens when you, for the Christians listening to me, when you read such a part in the Bible, you say, praise the Lord, hallelujah. They talk about Efunroye, Osuntinubu. You start having strong libido. You start shouting, activists, oh, don't do that movie. But when your pastor preaches about such a thing, you have no problem with it. So we've laid the foundation. So slavery, that is the nature of slavery in Yoruba land. That is the nature of slavery in our part of the world. This is not a justification for slavery, but that was the reality. It was a means of punishment for bad behavior. It was a form of capital punishment to keep law and order in the Yoruba legal jurisprudence. So let's say we adopt Yoruba legal jurisprudence now. And part of it is what you see in the customary court. We are surely not going to be using slavery as a form of punishment because we have where to keep people. Prison wa see. You know, so so let's now I think I've been able to shed light on what slavery is from the Yoruba reality, from Yoruba epistemology, from a Yoruba legal system, from the Yoruba jurisprudence, from the Yoruba legality angle. Because some people don't know there is Yoruba law. Hopefully, we hope that the level of federalism in Nigeria will reach a level where we are going to have a Yoruba law, where somebody is going to say, I'm a major in Yoruba law. We hope, and we pray that this generation, I hope wokeness will not make us lose this generation. Now let's talk about who we are talking about today. There's a reason why I started that way. So in your mind, you know maybe it's a heroine or a villain. You know, a lot of people that have challenged this matter, they always take this matter from a selfish point of view. People like Rosevival, Undein, those are selfish people. Rosevival has hatred against the Yoruba race. And I understand where he's coming from. I sympathize with him. He has so much vengeance against us. It's like he wants the Yoruba people to be brought to their knees. And I understand. As a descendant of the Saro, and with his kind of supremacist and classist ideology, he ought to hate Tinubu. He knows his history. Tinubu was a guest bringing Saro back into Lagos State, into Lagos. Efunroye Tinubu was a guest. But let's wait. So Efunroye Tinubu was born. Some people said, I've seen two contrasting his date of birth. She was born 1810 to 1887. 1810 to 1887. Some people believe she was born earlier than that she was born in the late 18th century. Efunroye Tinubu was born in the century of blood and iron in Yoruba land. May we never see such a century again in Yoruba land. She was born during the period of the wars. She was born when the Oyo Empire collapsed. She was born when Owu was destroyed. She was born during the war between the Yoruba people and the Yoruba jihadists. Some people said I'm talking about the Yoruba jihadists. Yes, the war between Ilorin and Ibadan was not a war between Fulani and Yoruba people. That's not true. It's a wrong description of that war. There's a reason. You can see I'm going left, right, because this is a very broad topic and it needs to be broken down systematically. And a lot of things needs to be unpacked so that you can get the proper perspective. This is not just saying Efunroye Osuntinubu, was born by an Egbaowu family, blah 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 blah, Abeokuta, all those things. No, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to lay the foundation, properly make you understand. You can close your eyes as you're listening to me and go back 200 years back and sit down and as if you are watching a movie as I'll be going through this narrative. The war between Ilorin and Ibadan in 1840, that war of all wars was a war between Yoruba jihadists and Yoruba secularists. The people that were coming from Ilorin were speaking Yoruba now. It was the Islamized Yoruba successor states that they now wanted to impose that Islamic civilization on the rest of Yoruba land. Meanwhile, Yoruba already had its own indigenous civilization system. It was a civilization war. A treacherous war of survival. So it was not a war between Fulani and because 90% of those who came to fight that war were also speaking Yoruba from Ilorin. So it was between two Yoruba speaking armies. Unfortunately, we are very grateful that the indigenous Yoruba civilization won that battle. If not, the destiny of Africa would have been changed to this very moment. That is why will never, if I see anybody trying to bring a form of religious extremism, I say these are the enemies of Yoruba of Yoruba race. You know what they are trying to do. So why will you take up arms and be fighting your fellow Yorubas because of religion? You've been brainwashed. You are damaged. Those are the people my forefathers fought at Osogbo to prevent them from destroying Yoruba land. And we are still going to continue to ensure that they don't destroy us. Because we've seen those useless rhetorics, some pockets of people in some misguided elements still saying that rubbish. That's why we have peace. If not, your land would have been worse than what you see in Zamfara. No apologies for saying what I said. Because theocracy and democracy cannot coexist. That is why democracy failed in Iraq. It failed in Libya. It failed in Iran. It failed in Lebanon. It failed in Jordan. It failed in Morocco. That's not democracy. You cannot have theocracy and be talking about democracy. There's no democracy in Uzbekistan. No democracy in Azerbaijan. No democracy in Mongolia. There's no democracy in Kazakhstan. There's no democracy in Kyrgyzstan. Because there are civilization issues. Forget all the lies. So there's no democracy there. That's why everybody thinks, the Yoruba people, they should be the symbolism of one Nigeria. Because your forefathers spilled their blood to create that secularism. You want a secular country, you must fight for it. You want a secular society, you must fight for it. So this peace, stability in Yoruba land was fought with blood and iron. Not through Owambe. Not through taking your sleeping around Yoruba demo. That's not how you did. That's not how this secularism was achieved. It was achieved through blood and iron. So Efunroye Osuntinubu was, like I said, was born in Abeokuta. There has been some different arguments as regards to where he was, different arguments about who she is. And going by what history tells us, I'm going to start listing some things. You can get a pen and a paper before I start going into our life proper. Efunroye Osuntinubu was a coin. That's number one. Was a Yoruba nationalist. If she was alive, she's going to be happy with people like me and people like you or the people in the audience listening to me. 2, 3. She was a warrior. She had her own private militia. So she was like Efunroye, also in Ibadan. She was like Madam Omosa, also from Ibadan. Those are warriors that fought in battles, but I'm not going to go to them today. She was a kingmaker. She determined who became kings in Lagos. Then it was Eko. She also determined who became king, Obas. In when Oba Oyekan and Oba Demola were also fighting for the throne of the Egbas in Abeokuta. So she was a kingmaker. She was the Aliko Dangote of her time. Her wealth, her power for a woman in the 19th century when Europeans were still treating their own women as slaves. She was a phenomenon. So she had immense power and riches. So she was a business Mongol. She was a powerful aristocrat. And I said she was a Yoruba nationalist. Now, she had a very humble beginning. She first married her husband, and her husband died untimely. She gave birth to 2 children with her husband, but she was a very hardworking woman. She started her life by selling leaves, barks, igilomanta. She used to sell firewood. She used to sell, her grandmother was Auntogood Nitewetegbo. So she was taught in the art of herbal medicine and all the rest. So she was born into the family of people that knew business. And it is this business, our business skills, our business acumen that took her into the corridors of palaces across Yoruba land. You see, the Efunroye Osuntinubu story actually shows the role of Yoruba people in the construction of modern Lagos. And I know it's normal. If Efunroye Osuntinubu was maybe from Abeokuta or from Ondo or from Ekiti, I don't think anybody from the southeast is going to care. But you mentioned Efunroye Osuntinubu, and you want to talk about the history of Lagos with their own agenda in Lagos. They will be throwing tantrums because anytime you want to talk about the Yoruba history of Lagos, they are against it. They're against it. I remember 2 years ago, I wanted to speak about the history of Lagos. They came out and said, no, how dare you talk about the history of Lagos? This is how I knew we are dealing with expansionists in the 21st century. Expansionists in the 21st century. So, now let's go. How did this woman that was neither a princess, she didn't come from a powerful nobility, she was a young widow, How all of a sudden, how did she acquire this power might? She married Oba Adele, who was, the full name of Oba Adele is Oba Adele Ajosun. And she's the great-great-grandfather of the Oba Adele, who was an ally of Chief Obafemi Awolowo in the 1950s, who really helped the action group. So it's unfortunate I see some people with Adele names, going about saying all sort of rubbish against Yoruba identity in 2024. That's why I said, the issue, this issue of people looking for ways to hit, they will deny their fathers and mothers. This is what the feudal system of Nigeria has cost us. But let's continue. She married for the second time. So she married Oba Adele Ajosun. Oba Adele Ajosun, the royal stool of Lagos State is one of the most political stool. That Oba's chief stool is one of the most political stool in the world, in Yoruba land. The politics, the intricacies, they just continue to switch sides. So, and it was because of this instability in the Obaship position in Lagos State. That was how in Lagos. That was how in Eko. Let me start using Eko instead of Lagos, because as at the 1810, 1820, Lagos did not exist. It was known as Eko. And we pray and hope that a day is coming that Lagos State will be changed to Eko State. We hope and pray it's going to happen in our lifetime, because they are still relics of colonialism. So, when Oba Adele reigned, firstly was the Oba of Lagos between 1811 to 1821. And due to the palace politics, especially with the Benin influence and everything, he lost that stool and came back into that stool briefly between 1835 and 1837. The father of Oba Adele was Oba Ologun Kutere, and he had brothers. The brothers were Akitoye and Oshilokun. It was during the period of exile of Oba Adele. That was when he married Osuntinubu, Tinubu. And I think that woman must be a very beautiful woman. Because if you go through her history, she never married a poor person. Everybody she was marrying were very powerful. She must be a very pretty woman anyway. So that was just a form of people to just laugh about. So she has to be the Cleopatra or Artemis, or I don't know, the queen. I don't know. She's not Jezebel anyway, but she had power. And it was when she married Oba Adele, when Oba Adele was in exile, that during that time, it's either you are exiled to Badagry. That Badagry used to be called Agbadagiri. It was Agbadagiri that became corrupted into Badagry. Or you are exiled to Ekpe. Those were not within the township of that Eko proper. So, because those places were just other places. And she was a very powerful businesswoman. She used her influence as the wife of Oba Adele to acquire wealth. I've been expecting that, hopefully, I hope I'm wrong. The Adele family, I hope they too will not do not join Rose Bible to be condemning Osuntinubu, Tinubu. Maybe they are condemning their stepmother or mother self proper. So I have been waiting Because that is the kind of politics they are doing now. Anything to demonize Yoruba people. So, when you talk about the role of Yoruba people in Eko proper, that particular colony. So, an Egba woman had once been a queen of the Eleko of Eko. So, the Egba people and the other Yorubas had always been meddling in the politics of Eko before the existence, before Kato Loyun Lo Lugat ni Egba, Oyo, Awori, Ijebu have been coming together to determine the politics of Eko. So it is an anomaly for an Uchenna or for one Siroma to be telling an Egbama, what are you doing in the politics of Lagos? It's because, and you are going to see some Yoruba people agreeing with that rubbish, it's because of the lack of historical knowledge. If you don't know your history, you are going to become slaves. Because if you look at this audience currently, there are a lot of non-Yorubas listening to me than even Yoruba people. Because they need to learn your history so that they can know how to come for you. So when you talk about Yoruba history, they quickly come in there. They want to know who you are. They want to know more better. The only history they know about Kwara State till today, they are mocking you. Afaja. Because it is not to empower you, it is to mock you and know your weakness. Because if you study the history of your enemy, you are going to know his enemy. You are going to know his weakness. Because nothing is new under the sun. So let's continue on this. So, during the time of the 19th century, after the fall of the Oyo Empire, there was a lot of human cargo. And the 19th century, when I say human cargo, a lot of Yoruba became slaves. That was the bitter truth. It was a dark period for Yoruba land. And it was a time of the warlords. That there's one particular warlord, when he gathers 1,000, 2,000 war boys, armed with guns and ammunition, will go to a particular isolated settlement, raid the place, capture them, go and sell them for material gains. It was a wide period of something like the wide West. And this was also during the time of the Sokoto Caliphate. Sokoto Caliphate also emerged around 1804, 1805. That was when it also emerged. And the Sokoto Caliphate was built on conquest, brutal conquest of Hausa city states, the Nupe kingdoms. A lot of Middle Belt areas were decimated. And a lot of people they saw as Kafiris were sold into slavery. Normally, there was also this trans-Saharan slave trade. We need to break this down. How did slave became so much an important... Look, slavery at a point in time was the crude oil of many economies of the world. So we need to actually, and the people that have made billions of dollars from slavery, that was how they were able to build Europe and America. That you are speaking in tongues, that you scabash every night. God, give me visa. Holy scroll. It was built with slavery money. Some of them were even built with money made from opium, drug money. The history of the world is not kind. United Kingdom was selling drug, opium, Pablo Escobar of the 19th century. Banks like Lloyd's Bank was built with money made from slavery. I know many of you in the UK, you use Lloyd's Bank. Bank here makes sense. Gone. Slavery, ni wọ́n fi rí owó ẹ̀. Slavery. Ports like Liverpool, all those places, new cities were built with slave money and drug money. So if you have a house in Liverpool today, or you have a bank in Lloyd's Bank, close down bank in here. Slave me, we will cancel Lloyd's Bank. And you did it. You have to understand that entity, so that's when we talk about, don't let some people use your land to build empires. Don't allow some people to use your existence to build greatness. Nothing will happen, the world will move on. So, the Sokoto Caliphate, I told you, was the biggest plantation slavery. 70%, I've forgotten the name, it was written by an Hausa man, Hausa scholar, historian. 70% of the people in Sokoto Caliphate were slaves in 1830s. So, slave was a big commodity. And there were two places to sell these slaves. It's either you go through the Trans-Sahara slave trade, or you go through the transatlantic slave trade. Now, the Arab slavery started before the transatlantic slave trade. Before the Pope, it was the Roman Catholic Pope in the 15th century that gave a spiritual edict that slavery is permitted in Christianity, which gave the spiritual mandate cover for Europeans to now go deeper, especially the Portuguese, who are mostly Catholics, to now engage in full-blown slave trade of black people. So if you're a Catholic listening to me today, you need to leave the Catholic Church. You want to be woke. You need to leave the Catholic Church. Because the Catholic Church, 400 years, I think 300 years plus before, and it was a Pope, Holy Roman Pope, the most purest father, that gave the legal seal for the slavery to start. So if you are a Catholic and you dare open your mouth against Madame Efunroye or Osuntinubu, you are a hypocrite. You are a hypocrite. Catholic power was built, part of the billions of dollars they made was from slave trade. Torí Pope náà gba share in the slavery, enslavement of black people. Enslavement of black people. Ṣé ti rí pé ó ti ń tabayé, ó ti ń tabaroko, ó ti ń tabaralé, ó ti ń tabaroko, little by little. Good. We are getting there. So if you are not cursing Pope, and you dare open your mouth, because you want to do Labour Party politics, you are a fool. You are a fool. You are not going to use our own heroines, our own patriarchs and matriarchs to score cheap political points within Nigeria. Yoruba is beyond Nigeria. We existed before Nigeria. God willing, it doesn't matter what happens in the future, the next millennium, we exist after Nigeria. So, she was a very powerful trader. So, there was an influx of slaves. So, instead of taking the slaves through the Sahara route, take them to Tripoli, before you can sell them into the Ottoman Empire world or the Arab world, it was very easy to bring the slaves and come and sell it in the Atlantic port to the Europeans. It was all trade. That was why there is a popular saying that says the dream of the Sokoto Caliphate, which Madam Fodio, is to dip the Quran, the sword of conquest, into the Atlantic Ocean. It is all economics. Because when they are bringing these slaves from the Connaught, they need to sell it to middlemen, like Efunroye and like Efunroye. So Efunroye was a middlewoman. If you don't sell it to her, other people will also take over that business and buy it. So there was a lot of human cargoes coming in from the Sahara. And these Yoruba businessmen and women were the middlemen who will buy it because they control the trade route. You see, trade routes are extremely important in geopolitics, empire building, kingdoms, and, kingdoms and city-states and nation-states. So she controlled that entire monopoly of that port. Because that was the only functional port of you coming to come and sell slaves. So when you had this control, and so the Sokoto Caliphate was also not happy. How can we? They are selling a slave for £10, but these people are buying it from us from £2. So for economic power, why don't we have our own port that we can now take our slaves that we've captured and sell them in our home port, at our own port? By doing that, we are going to become extremely rich. Extremely rich. So that was where the issue of, there's something the Fulanis have perfected. When I look at them, I clap for them. They've been able to, and the people that used to do that before used to be the Europeans. Now the Jews do it, and the Christian evangelicals in America also do it. The Arabs also do it using Islam. Do you know what they do? They've been able to mix religion and politics to achieve a devastating effect. They've been able to use religion and politics to achieve a devastating result. They've been able to use it. So somebody needs a port to be able to have its own port, because the Trans-Saharan slave trade route was no longer economically buoyant. All of a sudden, these coastal city-states became extremely rich. They became armed. The system of warfare started changing. People started using arms and ammunition. All this issue of using cavalry became a guessing giri. Your sword lance became useless. And because these people control the trade route to the Atlantic Ocean, the Sokoto Caliphate wanted a piece of the pie. So how do you motivate, how do you motivate the Jamas? Oh, we need to dip the sword of conquest, the Quran, into the Atlantic Ocean for a particular, because of, we need to conquer the Kafiris. Meanwhile, the economy, only. Ọ̀nà àtijẹ ń gbogbo ẹ̀. Ọ̀nà àtijẹ òun ni gbogbo ẹ̀. That's why you need to use your head. Everything is for an economic takeover of your space. So, Madam Efunroye became a powerful middlewoman. So that means Tinubu has always controlled Lagos. From the 19th century, another Tinubu is also controlling Lagos. Fate, sometimes you don't even know how it works. In the 21st century. That's why you see, I was still going to break some things down. If you know your history, life will make sense to you. It is lack of history. That is why if you know your history, you will just laugh. You will know why is Roosevelt this bitter? Why is Doherty this bitter? It is a generational war. Ogun tí ò tí parí, ìjà ìlara tí ò tí parí between the Tinubus and the Saros. Òun náà ṣì ń jà dòní. Maybe pẹ̀lú pé àrà tún wá ran bọ́ǹbù lọ́wọ́. You ask the person is still not bearing Tinubu with that economic power. Leko, àbọ̀dọ̀ mú balẹ̀. Because they achieved a lot in the 19th century. And now were they able to do it? They connived with outsiders to destroy Tinubu. They are doing the same thing in 21st century. So history is not for you to just, laugh about. It's a cycle. It's a cycle. There's a reason why I'm piecing it together. So that So she was so powerful. And yes. So what she did was she used the influence of Obadele to build I'm already sweating. to build a business empire. And one of her son-in-laws, later on, she, after Obadele died in 1837, and Obadele Ajosun, because I need to be very specific, she became the kingmaker. The queen's mother. She was the one controlling who becomes the king, who doesn't become the king in Eko, and she controlled the economy of Lagos State. She was in contact with the Brazilian government, the Portuguese government. She had so much power. I want to say some fun fact. Don't laugh at me. I just hope President Tinubu is not the reincarnation of Madam Efunroye. When you read the history, the difference is just one is a man, the other one is a woman. The uncanny semblance in the way they operated, in the way they controlled, in the economic power, how ruthless they are when it comes to economics. It's almost the same. And the enemies, their primordial enemies, is also the same. So it stood good to be how am I going to put it? To be to look like the same. So Madam Tinubu supported Akitoye, the brother-in-law to Oba Adele, to become the Oba of Lagos. But the British had bigger plans. They've been observing, apart from selling slaves as a middlewoman, Madam Tinubu also sold tobacco. She sold palm oil. She sold cotton. She sold cash crops, cola nuts to the European, especially our business partner were the Portuguese. The Portuguese loved her so much. And so she supported Akitoye to become the Oba of Lagos. And the British had bigger plans for West Africa. And Lagos was like the Hong Kong of West Africa. And because of the interest they had in Lagos, Lagos was the piece of the cake that was very, very important to create Nigeria. That's why Lagos is the key to Nigeria. The creation of Nigeria started from Lagos. Without Lagos, there's no Nigeria. And that's how it has been till date. And Madam Tinubu saw it. The British, I've forgotten the name of that consul, Campbell. That powerful British consul, his name was Campbell, Benjamin Campbell, was extremely wary of Madam Tinubu controlling a woman. Firstly, she was a woman and they hated it. It was extremely humiliating for Europeans, British, the rulers of the British Empire, one of the most powerful empire in the world at that time. For them to now be interacting with a black Yoruba woman, it was too humiliating for them. It was too humiliating for them. And because it was too humiliating for them, they needed to take her out. And they were looking for every opportunity to take her out. She was armed. She had her own slave army. When we say slave army, having a slave army is not something new. I'm going to go to Egypt. That's why if you want to know Yoruba history, don't limit your knowledge to Yoruba history. You must be able to talk about Egyptian history, Middle East history, European history, the Aztecs history, the Mesoamerican history, Inca history. You must be able to piece the history of the world. Because the history of the world is not an isolated history, it is interwoven. But because the history of the world is interwoven, if you are just limited to just the history of Yoruba people, you will not be able to understand how the world operates. So there's a slave army called the Mamluks in Egypt. The Mamluks, they later became the rulers of Egypt for many centuries. So creating a slave army is nothing new. It's nothing new. And slaves army are always one of the most ruthless and one of the most effective. The Ottoman Empire became very powerful because it built its army, the most fearsome units, on captured Christian boys. They were called the Janissaries. You can check what I'm saying out. The Janissaries. So the Janissaries were the ones that were the elite Ottoman army that were responsible for most of the victories and the success of the Ottoman army. So Madam Tinubu also had her own slave army. Very powerful. Very powerful. So she had her own force to enforce her will, to protect her business empire, and to give her personal security. So when it became, they were fighting for who is going to become the Oba of Lagos. Then I also want to say this. One of the things that Madam Efunroye Tinubu fought against was that she observed that the British started bringing in freed slaves from Sierra Leone and Brazil. So when they brought them back, those ones became Christians. And all of a sudden, they started acting as the middlemen for the British. And they started acquiring economic power. And Madam Tinubu started asking questions. What is going on? These people are changing the nobility class in Eko, now called Lagos. They are even subjugating the indigenous Aworis. And Madam Tinubu started saying no. The economic power of this land. You can understand that many of you that are fighting for Yoruba land, for Yoruba jobs, for Yoruba people, the economy of Lagos must be controlled by Yoruba people. All of you have the spirit of Efunroye or Osuntinubu in your mind, in your body. You are fighting the same cause. So Madam Tinubu, in fact, there was a particular man called Adejumo, who was one of these westernized Yoruba people then, early educated one, who started, they were the ones that started making all sorts of accusations against Madam Tinubu. Oh, she's the one controlling the economy of Lagos. Oh, she's the one. Is it different from what is happening now? When you see people like Doherty, Rose Rival, and you are saying, oh, it is one person that is controlling the economy of Lagos. You think they love the indigenous people? That's why we need to work with their worries, with the Jebus. Don't listen to these people. They are British agents, like their forefathers. This is not to abuse the Saros. But there's a lot of Saros. Atishafe Moore was a Saro that wrote the Yoruba laws and legal institutions. Ajayi Crowder. Those are wonderful people. Alakija was an Aguda. Wonderful people. There are some people in our midst that were also responsible for the destruction of Sierra Leone. They are always supporting the political agenda of the occupiers instead of the indigenous people. So, because some people say, oh, TYF is bashing Saro again. No, ela won ti omo lori buruku yen fe lo won ti Rose Bible ko. Show money. So you're going, and you know your history. You know this is the same spirit, the same behavior. The same behavior. And these are people that will never change. That's why we must be alive to our responsibility. So the British wanted to capture Lagos. And there was a war. And between the Kosokos and the Akitoyes. The justification, we need to learn. There is one thing that made the British Empire to be the most biggest empire in the world. At a point in time, they controlled almost two-thirds of the world. And that's for that small country. The British Empire did not achieve that greatness mostly through war and superior firepower. The British Empire acquired that greatness through the use of treachery, deception, and diplomacy. I don't think anybody has ever gone into any alliance with the British without regretting it. If the British sign any treaty with you, you are in trouble. They will only sign that treaty until they destroy you. They are still coming to destroy that treaty. They will look for one excuse. And the excuse came when Akitoye and Kosoko were fighting for the border of Lagos Ships too. And when the British, if you look at so many books, that's why when you look at so many books, you're going to know, oh God of mercy, there's an agenda that is playing out here. In so many of those books, they are going to say the British dislodged Kosoko because they wanted to stop the slave trade.